Morning, everybody.
Morning.
My name's Jason Wisniewski. I'm from down by Ivanhoe. I gotta get the button working here.
It's not working. You just unplug it and plug it back in the thing, the little thing on the right.
That's a good sound. Okay. So today I'm going to go over a little bit of my background, what I call glitches in the matrix from working in the agricultural industry and growing up on the farm. Why I think soil health is so important now. Why I think some people resist the idea of focusing on soil health in their farming operations. My experience I'll share with transitioning with farmers and renters. And then I've got some resources I can share with everybody. So a little bit about me. This is my family. It's hard to make out today on this projector, but grew up on the farm. Here's me with some cows out in my dad's cornfield. This is where Ivanhoe is located, about in the southwest corner, just about to South Dakota. This is our farming operation, one of the last years that my father was actively farming before renting out our land. We'd done no-till into corn stalks off every other year, and then so what I call glitches in the matrix is after leaving the farm for college, I began working for John Deere and several ag technology companies. So they had me traveling all over the country, selling a seeder monitor for air seeders, and then I became a product manager and a business analyst, and they would fly me down. You know, I took a private jet down to Louisiana to look at sweet potatoes one time, and I got to see the beast from the inside, what Big Ag is doing. So coming from a small farm and being exposed to Big Ag's mechanisms was really eye-opening in a lot of ways, and it started to make me ask some questions. This is one of our test sites down in Arizona, and I just like this photo because we're literally in the middle of a desert. The 8 years that I worked for these technology companies, there was zero talk about biology. Zero. There are hundreds of millions of dollars being pumped into this system to farm every inch of your soil different than another inch that could be a couple feet away. Millions and millions, hundreds of millions, billions of dollars. I mean, government programs to fund these companies with R&D, it was astounding to see these type of numbers when I was working for these guys. And one of the misconceptions I noticed from all my coworkers was this idea that farmers were wealthy. So commodity prices were on the way up, but we had had a long stretch before that, my entire life growing up on the farm, where it was a downward trend. And all of a sudden, farmers were rich, according to my coworkers that had all grown up in cities. And I really struggled with that for a long time. I thought, my gosh, is my family just terrible at farming? How can these guys afford all this brand new equipment, these big fancy new pickup trucks? So I started asking questions about where the money is coming from. And while I was working at John Deere for their electronics department, I was working in program management. We would get these messages from Des Moines and the headquarters in the Quad Cities, and they would constantly say, what we're doing is about feeding the world. Everybody should feel good day in and day out about what we're doing, because our objective is to increase production at all costs, because the human growth rate is expanding at a rapid increase, and we won't be able to keep up with our production. So we must use this technology to get every last ounce out of the fields. So I started, really struggled with this, because growing up, I grew up in this time period right here. 88 to 28, or 88 to 2006 is when I was on the farm. And it was just a downward slide. If you look at inflation adjusted corn, wheat, and soybeans. If the world is so close to starvation, I couldn't understand why commodity prices kept falling. If we're producing the most valuable thing for people to live, food, why are the prices dropping? Why aren't people beating on farmers' doors to get some of the grain out of their bins? I went to business school, marketing, and they taught us this thing called supply and demand. And it didn't seem like the commodity markets function that way. Here we have the real price of corn from 1950 to 2010 alongside the corn yield. So there, supply and demand seems to make a little bit of sense. We went from 40 bushel an acre production yield up to 160 average in that span of 60 years. And coinciding with that, the real price of corn dropped. But we were told that we needed this extra production because there was going to be more demand, right? The population is just blowing up. So we expanded fourfold what we could produce from an acreage. And here's the amount of land. So this was looking at bushels per acre average yields. Here's the amount of land in production from 1960 to 2020. Look at corn here. Right around 2000, we see the renewable fuel standard enacted. And what happened to corn? Skyrocketed. So this is land. Look at all the crops are going up for the most part, except whatever this one is. That might be bananas or something. But for the most part, corn's going up, soybeans going up. So this is land that was probably not cropped at all before. This is probably grassland that was taken out to support these crops. And then there's data out there that says the world population growth rate is declining. And it's been declining since, what is that? After 1960, when that leader in China, Mao, died, as he was really creating a genocidal environment in China. So they think, by all projections, that with this decrease in population growth, that we're going to level off around 2050. And we might start declining after that in population. Actually, India and China are already seeing declines. You know, China enacted one-child laws in their country, and that's had some severe ramifications. But let's go back to production again. So here's corn and soybeans. Oops. Corn and soybeans from 51 to 2021. We went from, 5 billion up to 15 billion. Soybeans was pretty dramatic from, under 100 billion to over 4 billion. Here's the actual numbers. 2021, 15 billion bushels of corn produced in the United States. This is according to USDA numbers. Soybeans, 4.3 billion. So from 1950, these two crops, corn had a 5-fold increase, soybeans a 14-fold increase in our production. Population was not increasing at that rate by a long shot. So where's all this corn going? Well, according to the USDA, food, seed use, feed, and residual use are the only breakdowns that they provide. Food is thrown in with alcohol and industrial use. So we can look at how that breaks down according to their reports. This is what they consider food alcohol, and industrial use. They don't say food, seed, and industrial use. They don't say which ones of these are food or industrial. So can we consider high fructose corn syrup food? People get calories from it. I don't know if it's not nutritious, so I'm going to say no. I don't think that's food. Glucose and dextrose, same thing. It's another sugar derived from corn. Not food. Starch, we use it in some food products, but is this for dry cleaning? Is it for other industrial products? They don't tell us. Alcohol for fuel. 78% of this category is alcohol for fuel, not food. Alcohol for beverages and manufacturing. They throw the beverages in with the manufacturing alcohol. Either way, it's not food. Cereal and other products, okay, maybe that's food. Maybe it's junk food. I think most cereals today are mostly sugar. And then we've got seed. You know, I don't know why they threw seed in here when it's in a separate break out there, but anyway, ultra-processed food is what they're trying to call food here in a few of these categories. I would say that's not food. We eat food to live long, healthy lives. So you take that 48% of the total corn crop in the United States, you take the 78% of that 48%, and that means 38% of corn goes to alcohol for fuel. 38%. Now let's look at feed and residual use. So feed is actually a pretty inefficient use of corn when it goes through livestock. We only get about 1/3 of the calories from that 38% as human calories. And what's residual use? They don't break that out of this 38%. We don't know what that is. So it looks like, according to the USDA, residual use just means unexplained use. I don't know why they couldn't break that out. Why do they throw it in with feed? Is it an agenda to make it look like we're feeding more to livestock? I don't know. So that, while I was working at the ag technology companies, it led me to this conclusion. The most dangerous misconception in agriculture is that we are feeding the world. When 40% of our corn is used in ethanol production, population growth is slowing, that can't be true. And I think as farmers, we need to focus on feeding ourselves and our families before we are so concerned about feeding the world and making sure that we're running profitable operations. Enter regenerative agriculture. Well, let me get to that. When I started learning about regenerative agriculture, it started busting a lot of myths that are deeply held in conventional agriculture. Propagated mostly by the companies I worked for, the big tech egg manufacturers, seed companies, chemical manufacturers. And I talk to a lot of producers now and have a lot of discussions. And from what I'm learning, these are some of the most common things I hear from producers that continue to enforce this idea that these management practices that are not sustainable. Plant growth is a biological process, not a chemical one. So we know this now. So this is an unpopular fact. Governments cause starvation, not a lack of food. We are creating 14 billion calories when we have created enough calories to feed 14 billion people. It's not how much we're creating. Just because you create more food doesn't mean that food is getting to the right places. Corn and soy are now industrial products. They're not food. We just went through that with corn. I'd like to do that analysis with soy sometime, but I didn't have time. But I'm fairly certain I see plastics and road treatments that are made of soy. We know that the protein content and the nutrition value of these crops has declined steadily over the last 50, 70 years. This one is really exciting to me, and I want to do more research on it, but there are plants, most plants gather most of the matter that their plant matter is made up of atmospheric elements. They can do that with the help of biology, so they don't need to extract any nutrients, barely any nutrients from the soil. Biology can convert the nitrogen in the atmosphere to a usable form for the plant. If we stop synthetic nitrogen applications, you enable those relationships with those bacteria that can convert that atmospheric nitrogen. Carbon. Plants suck carbon out of the air. Yep.
Does putting nitrogen or on the field stop the plant from absorbing it from the atmosphere then? Does it inhibit the relationship?
Yeah, it makes the plant lazy, and it actually doesn't develop the mechanism to interact with the microbes.
Whoa.
Like tillers on the bottom of a corn plant, they'll actually start to exude like a sugar that attracts that biology to convert the nitrogen. But if you're injecting nitrogen, it won't excrete that.
Whoa.
Yeah, so that's a really exciting one. We've known it. A gentleman did a study back in 1664, and he was thrown in prison. He just grew a willow tree in a pot of soil. He measured the soil, and he let it grow for 5 years, took the tree out, measured the soil, and it was the same weight, okay? All he had added was water. Now what, I think it's Dr. Christine Jones, she's done a lot of research on the liquid carbon pathway that's explaining how this works. So plants rely on microbes to access nutrients. You know, in second grade, we were shown that plants just magically absorb N, P, and K through the roots. And that's all farmers are taught for the rest of their lives about the process of plants extracting nutrients from the soil. It's kind of this it just happens. They just absorb. Well, now we know that microbes are in between that. They are the middlemen. The plant doesn't get anything without the microbes. When I tell people to no-till, when I ask people if they've tried no-till or suggest that they should try it, one of the first things I get is, well, that means I'll have to increase my herbicide. I don't think we can do no-till without cover crops. That's how we manage for weeds or those early succession plants, forbs. Soil type, we're growing topsoil in deserts. So I don't think your soil type is an excuse. Just look at a sidewalk. If you didn't mow your lawn or use that edger, it's going to completely be consumed by the grass around it. Or an old fence line. You guys have seen how they just get buried. Sometimes that's from wind erosion. But biology, if plants can grow there, biology will take it over if we've got the right conditions, right? And sometimes that includes livestock. Today's crops have a fraction of the protein and nutrition as 20, 50 years ago. So back to feeding the world, we're getting we're getting less efficient at doing it if we continue to decrease the nutrition, the protein content. You can look at the test weight of corn and soybeans over the last 30 years. It's consistently been going down. Then 70% of farm revenues are derived from direct and indirect government subsidies. So a lot of times growers will say, stay out of my business. Don't tell me how to farm. I'm not going to tell you how to farm, but I will tell you you're doing it on taxpayer money. And that's one of the great things I love about regenerative agriculture is this is a path to greater independence from those subsidies. So I don't think people think it affects land values. But if you consider the difference between a desertified land or field to a healthy soil, who's going to pay more for, what are you going to pay more for, you know? It's going to have an effect on land values. Eventually, you cannot extract any more organic matter. You're going to be so reliant on these synthetic inputs. It is going to hit the bank. I truly believe it does. And I think we have a lot of Band-Aids right now that cover up, in the form of subsidies, that cover up the issues we're having with our soils. So after I started learning all this, I started researching, you know, found Allan Savory's work, and he pointed out 2/3 of the world is desertifying. I mean, look, this is a satellite image, right? And most of the western United States, the southern portion of South America, North Africa, the Middle East, China, India, Mongolia, huge 2/3 of the world's land is desertifying. It, I truly believe after listening to Allan's work that it's the biggest issue of our time, and it's coming to a head soon. Yep.
Do you know how he quantifies that?
Just looking at the color of the soil.
No, is that color of soil or vegetation or?
Yeah, this tan stuff is just desert and light, poor quality soil. Yeah.
I'm wondering about, the rate. Have they measured the rate of this desertification? Because I'm just wondering historically.
Yeah. I think it was 75 billion tons a year of topsoil we're losing across the world is what I just watched the video a couple days ago. Just astounding.
So where is it going?
Well, I know during the Dust Bowl, a lot of it went into the ocean, the Atlantic Ocean, but I know a lot of the sand from the Sahara and the African deserts blows over to South America, actually, and fertilizes the Amazon. But a lot of it could be just dropping into the ocean, you know, from wind erosion.
Yeah, I know topsoil in Minnesota, I mean, most of it in the Minnesota River Basin goes into the Mississippi.
And we're losing a vast amount of carbon, organic matter, just into the atmosphere. When we do tillage, we introduce so much nitrogen that the bacteria consume the organic matter in the soil and respirate it as CO2. So it's going, the physical minerals and nutrients, you know, are blowing away, getting overly concentrated in some areas, going into the ocean, and then the carbon, the organic matter is going up in the sky. You know, so I wonder, I look back at some of these parts of the world and they say, you know, we've been performing some of these agricultural practices for thousands of years, and I wonder if places like this used to be a lot more fruitful. You read some of the stories in the Bible about how they used to grow such bountiful crops in the Middle East and Egypt and stuff. And I wonder if any of this was due to agricultural practices. Yep.
Yeah, I mean, if you went back a couple hundred years before we had all this chemical agriculture, this was probably going on at that time. So is it human impact, or is it, this opens up a big can of worms?
Well, I think we rapidly increased the rate at which we're desertifying with these chemicals and this heavy equipment.
Dr. David Montgomery says it's based off of the agricultural practices that we employed then, even.
But I mean, the pyramids were here how many years ago, and now it's desertification. BASF, Bayer, they weren't around at that time. So that's my question. I'm not trying to be
Well, tillage was done.
Which is what Dr. Dave Montgomery
Yeah.
points to as the
killing
main
the
cause, tillage.
biology
Yeah.
through tillage.
You know, and some of the early things we did to start destroying the soil here in America is killing off the bison. You know, that's a pile of bison skulls. Like we don't even, I don't think we can imagine what the herds were like. I mean, where they say there were 300 million bison, and that's a huge contributor to the topsoil and the cycle. There's a,
Was that sustainable?
right,
You know,
I don't know. You know, if that had continued on, I don't know. Livestock seems to be the conclusion of like the work of Allan Savory, is that livestock are a critical component. Like they have a biosis with plants and the soil.
animal populations fluctuate with their surroundings also, so when it gets overloaded, they naturally decrease and
Right. That's why adaptive grazing is so beneficial.
very complex.
You know, there's a pile of hides. So one of what really broke this all open for me was visiting with Gabe Brown and reading his book, Dirt to Soil. We had him out to our farms, and I drove him around to all of our fields, and we looked at everything. We got an assessment from him. I ran soil tests and had him review them with me and my family. And then I became a regenerative verifier, which I've got the website, but you guys can also check out these the protocol. This is a program where farmers can access different markets and be verified for the companies that want to buy regenerative products. They're working with some really big names in the food industry. So I get to travel the country now doing this. Instead of selling stuff to producers, I get to be out in the field and taking soil samples. This is a infiltrometer, water infiltrometer, so we're testing water infiltration. The tests we're going to send in the lab test aggregate stability, you know, total nutrient digestion, soil respiration, ton of stuff. It's a really comprehensive review and verification system. And I started, you know, honing my own observational skills. This is what I took last winter. Was terrible winter. This is our field, which is no-till. Has been no-till for 3 years. And you look at that road ditch. What are you going to see next to this? This is the very same day on the other side of the section. Just look at the contrast. I mean, what more verification do you need that no-till is going to save your soil? April 23rd, that following spring, we didn't have any, you know, nobody plants cover crops. It's so rare right around Ivanhoe, my area. It's really frustrating to see the tillage and the fallow and the erosion happening. It was just horrendous.
That's dust?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, so you know, people say the Dust Bowl is gone and past, and I don't think we've learned our lesson. Now this is what I'm challenged with on our farms. My grandfather's field here. We've got years of what I now know are harmful practices to the soil health, and we've got silt building up. And this was in the spring melt-off, what was happening to all that silt. If I could test this water, I'm sure there'd be heavy nitrates. This all runs into the creek down in the pasture. So Minnesota Ag Water Quality won't certify this field with this, the way it's being operated. And those are the tough conversations that I'm trying to have with my family. You know, this is the wind in there's a valley, there's a creek down here, and there's a huge ravine that's eroded out. More silt out in that same field. You know, this is by the house, topsoil on top of the snow. Here's a tile inlet. See how it's all washed out. You see the silt is all crusted up. Tan, see the light colored soil on top of the hills. That organic matter, if we tested just at the top of those hills, I don't know if there's a 0.5% organic matter left. But right across the road, we were able to talk one renter into trying it. So we put cereal rye in, and I was really excited to see green growth even in the middle of February. And this was May, and it just exploded through the month of May. Everybody was just starting to seed the corn and beans around May 24th, and we had our cereal rye was, above the knee. So it was really good to see that. We were feeding the biology while every surrounding field was starving. And then we cut that about a month later. The renter got, 3.7 tons of dry matter. This field had been corn on corn on corn for about 5 years for corn silage. So really happy with how it turned out the first year. And I'm crossing my fingers that the tenant keeps with the program. But I think a lot of it goes back to farmers, they were never taught the biology of how a plant grows. And I think we need to have that conversation and challenge the thinking more along that terms. There's a lot more going on around this root system than just magically absorbing nutrients. So the reasons that I, really got into this is I was doing real estate investing while I was working in agriculture, and I thought, man, what's the best thing we can do for our family's assets is improve the ability to lower our expenses. That will make the land more valuable. So that was one reason I came into it. And we just didn't know about this stuff, so I think it's important that these groups are out here putting this stuff on the internet, having these meetings. Personal health was a really big one for me. I was struggling myself to determine what to eat until I found regenerative agriculture. I wanted stuff that didn't, food that didn't have a harmful impact on my local economy, environmental or monetary. And I didn't want to have foreign compounds, poisons in it. So I learned that pastured protein from regenerative farmers is that is the healthiest, most nutritious, dense food you can find. And that leads into food sovereignty. It's important that we rebuild our local economies. We've got these vast tracts of land that are producing no food. The farmers that run these operations with thousands of acres of land are still relying on Walmart or Aldi to get their groceries. And it just seems so backwards to me when they've got the ability supposedly to produce all this food, and how reliant they are on a global trade system with apples from New Zealand and asparagus from Peru. And we've got such an opportunity to boost our local economies and the value of our land by producing food on farms again. It's a good way to spend time with family, when you get back into this. And then it was another way to generate revenue off of that land. So I'm glad, every one of these events should start with these 6 principles of soil health. I think these are super important, and then especially when you understand the why these are so important. And a question I like to ask growers is, to earn a 6-figure income, would you rather integrate livestock onto your farm or take a white-collar job in town? So, a lot of these guys, they want to go to Arizona for a couple months and then come back and plant in the spring and then leave every winter again. It's what the consolidation of these monocultures has allowed for a quality of life standpoint. And a lot of guys say, what, if I had to bring livestock back to the farm, I would probably just quit if that was my only choice. But what do you want the farm to look like in 200 years? I think that's another good question for a lot of these producers. And I don't think a lot of them are thinking about it. So I think if you choose not to do soil health, you're mainly making up excuses. The most dense compaction layer is right between our ears. You know, and we just, it's this mentality of saying you can't do something because we've become comfortable, right? You know, or there's an excuse, I'm too busy. You know, I have, today we had bad weather, but a lot of producers use an excuse of being too busy, right? To come and invest in themselves and their education. And I think a lot of it comes back to, do you see your soil as an asset, or is it becoming a liability? Because if you degrade that soil to the point where it relies on these inputs, these high cost nitrogen, pesticides, you are decreasing the value of your land. There's no way around it. You're increasing your reliance on those inputs, and you're increasing your reliance on the subsidies. The land is becoming inherently less valuable. And it couldn't become a liability at that point. If you're gonna owe, that means you have to dump more into producing anything off of it than you can get out of it. That becomes a liability. We can turn our land into a liability. So, transitioning with family. So I haven't figured this out yet. I am taking some land back from my parents. We had another tenant on there who didn't. I thought I did everything I could to try and engage in these practices, but they didn't want to do it. So I'm taking 140 acres back, and we've got 600 acres that I'm still working on. And the only way I think I'm going to get through on the rest of our land, you know, I don't need to run it myself. I'd rather change the current tenants' practices. But I don't know how to get there, because I think I've done just about everything. Gabe Brown came out to our farms twice, you know, and I threw an event in Ivanhoe with 80 people attending, and it's just sometimes it's really hard to change minds. So I'm just going to continue providing the education, continue the observation. This is a soil ped from, you know, a conventionally tilled field actually this one was no-till for 2 years, and this was out in the CRP. So bringing these things up to family members, you know, you can see the difference. Take them out in the field, put that shovel in the ground. Ideas for rental agreements. So if it were up to me, you know, if somebody was willing to have the conversation, which none of our tenants have been willing to have these conversations yet, we could structure something that was like a 5 to 15 year term. Crop share, I'm so excited about this and the potential. I would be willing to do a crop share agreement, or we can put it on like a periodic review where we have a fixed rate that it can increase. And I would require my tenants, in order to enter this lease, to study Regen Ag 101, which is a course provided by the Soil Health Academy. Because you don't understand the why behind all these practices, you're not going to do it. Another great thing we can do is require in our leases that renters follow the verification of regenerative. So this takes all the onus off of you. You can say, please get the land verified. Regenerative is interesting because it starts wherever you're at, but you must progress every 3 years. There are 5 tiers, and you must progress a tier every year. And a lot of it is around what percentage of your acres have maintained cover for, you know, 80% of the year, things like that. Are you decreasing your chemical dependence? Are you increasing water infiltration? Are you increasing ecosystems? Are we seeing more bugs, more birds? It's a really comprehensive review. So I'll hand out a sheet after I'm done here, so you guys have all this information. And then for structuring rental payments, one thing I would do, I've always thought about, and I was a commercial real estate broker after I got out of ag tech. I would start, so I did a lot of commercial leases. But if your conventional lease rate is here, I would start a little bit lower in the first 3 years if you on your lease rate. Give them an incentive, to invest in your land. And then bump it up above the conventional rate for years 4 through 6. They should be seeing, if they've been doing the education, getting the verification, they'll see the improvements. And I think you will see that you can charge more in rent for a healthier field because they can make more profit off of a healthy soil. So I think over time you can step that up every 3 years or every year, 1 to 3 years. Maybe cap it at 7 to 15% increase every 3 years, or do a crop share agreement. Or if you don't want to or if they don't want to do the formal verification, make yourself a checklist according to the 6 soil health principles. Minimum disturbance, diversity, armor on the soil. You can have some pass-fail criteria or just rate them on a 1 to 5 scale. Have them do a survey on how they think they did and then compare it to a survey that you did and see if they are actually making progress. Another good source is Land Stewardship. They've got a website with conservation leases I thought was really helpful, things you could take and adjust. Other resources, so I created this list of regenerative resources. It'll be on this sheet I'll hand out to you guys. It's got everything from different documentaries you can share with people, books, scientific research, local organizations in the Midwest, nonprofits. I write a newsletter for Understanding Ag. Sign up for that. These are some, if you're looking for local grazing connection or cropland regenerative sustainable farming practices connections between landlords and tenants, check out these sites. I've got more of those on my resources spreadsheet. And then obviously the Soil Health Coalition. It's been great networking with all of the different producers that care about soil health through the programs that they do in their mentorship network. So, any questions for me? Sorry, I got long-winded there. How much time did I take? 45?
Not so much a question from me, Jason, but...
Assertions, maybe corrections to my misunderstanding of things?
No. I've got to be appropriately humble in your presence. But one of the reasons that we being guys at created this project that we're partnering with you guys at the Soil Health Coalition on is our belief that we know enough to be in a better position right now regards the harmony between healthy food, healthy soil, clean water, resilient landscapes and watersheds. The science is there, the tools are there. You've just given us a great presentation. And yet, when you look at the landscape, what have we got? 4% in Minnesota in cover crop, something like that, Mark. Iowa maybe has 4.2. Indiana maybe beats them all at 4.8, but the figure is 100, maybe not 100%, but it should be with all the Gabe Browns, Seth Watkins, Rick Clark's. What's the problem here? Gabe has demonstrated up at Bismarck that it increased organic content. What are we missing?
It's hard.
Social sciences with our farming neighbors.
It's hard for me to remain patient and humble when I read the literature going all the way back to the Dust Bowl that has identified these problems almost 100 years ago now.
8 decades at least.
So is it? I think there's obviously a variety of issues, and the brain drain on our rural communities, I think, is a big part of that. Like I moved back from Fargo after working in ag tech to the farm, and there's just not an environment of learning. Why won't a producer try something on even 5 acres? I mean, are you running things that closely, that tight of a ship that you can't afford 5